The sound of their laughter echoed across the pristine asphalt of my brother-in-law's dealership. Mark stood in front of the gleaming glass entrance of Prestige Motors, his arm wrapped possessively around my sister, Sarah. My parents stood beside them, all four of them dressed impeccably for the dealership's 10th anniversary party. Then there was me, pulling up in my 20-year-old sedan, its engine humming a tune of loyal protest. The car had dents older than my niece and a patch of primer on the passenger door that never quite got painted over. Mark pointed, his face splitting into a wide, cruel grin. "Look what the cat dragged in," he boomed, loud enough for his employees and a few customers to turn and stare. "Still driving that piece of junk, huh? I'm surprised it didn't fall apart on the highway." Sarah giggled, a high-pitched sound that always felt like a tiny needle prick. My mother just sighed and looked away, a familiar gesture of second-hand embarrassment. They thought I was there to beg, to ask for a loan, or maybe just to grab a free hot dog from the grill they had set up. They had no idea I was the main event. They couldn't know that their laughter was the perfect soundtrack for the moment I had been working toward for 5 long years. They were mocking the very car that had carried me to my revenge, the humble vessel of my vindication. They saw a failure, a reminder of my past struggles. I saw the key that was about to unlock their ruin and my freedom. They believed the shiny new sports cars behind them were symbols of success, but in reality, they were just assets listed on the acquisition papers tucked neatly in my jacket pocket. Why would I want to buy the failing dealership of the man who made my life a living hell? To understand that, you have to go back to the day he convinced my family that I was worthless, and to the promise they broke that forced me into that old car in the first place. It all began 5 years ago, not with a bang, but with a frantic phone call from my mother. Her voice was trembling. "You need to come over, now. It's an emergency." When I arrived at my parents' house, the scene was pure theatre. My sister, Sarah, was sobbing into a silk pillow on the sofa. My father was pacing the floor, looking grim. And Mark, my brother-in-law, was sitting in my father's armchair as if it were a throne, looking artfully distressed. He was the centre of their universe, the golden child my own parents never had. He'd married their precious daughter, started a prestigious business, and in their eyes, he could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, steady one, the reliable one, the one they only called when something was broken. That night, it was Mark's business that was broken. Prestige Motors was on the verge of collapse. A series of bad investments, a downturn in the market. Mark spun a dozen excuses, none of which included his own reckless spending. He needed $50,000 immediately, or he would lose everything. The bank had turned him down. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, calculated plea. "You're the only one who can help us, man," he said, his voice cracking. My parents and Sarah turned to look at me, their faces a chorus of hopeful expectation. I had the money. I had worked double shifts for years, lived frugally, and saved every penny. It was for a down payment on a small house, a dream I'd been quietly building for myself. I also had a car I loved, a reliable coupe that I'd bought with my first big bonus. It was my one indulgence. They all knew this. My mother was the one who spoke first, her voice soft and manipulative. "It's a loan, of course," she said. "We'll all chip in. You'll have it back within a year, we promise." Mark nodded vigorously, putting his hand over his heart. "I swear on my life," he said, "you're saving us. You're saving the family." I looked at their faces, wanting so desperately to believe them, to feel like I was finally a part of the inner circle. So I did it. The next day, I drained my savings account and sold my car. The $50,000 was wired to Mark's business account. The only vehicle I could afford afterward was the 20-year-old sedan they were laughing at today. For the first few weeks, they treated me like a hero. There were grateful texts from Sarah and a hearty slap on the back from Mark whenever he saw me. My mother would say things like, "You did such a good thing. We're so proud of you." But the warmth faded quickly, replaced by a strange, dismissive pity. My sacrifice was no longer a noble act, it was a settled fact, an old transaction that was becoming inconvenient to remember. The joke started subtly. At a family dinner, Mark glanced out the window at my car parked on the street. "We should really get you a deal on something better," he said with a chuckle. "Can't have my brother-in-law driving around in that thing." It's bad for the family image. Everyone laughed, and I felt a hot knot of shame tighten in my stomach. I had bought him his image, and he was using it to mock me. The months ticked by. I saw Sarah posting pictures of new designer handbags and expensive dinners on social media. Mark bought himself a ridiculously expensive watch, which he made sure to show off at every opportunity. "A little reward for a great sales quarter," he'd said, winking at me. I was eating ramen noodles so I could rebuild my savings, while they were living large on the money that was supposed to be my future. I said nothing, clinging to the promise that I'd be repaid when the year was up. The 1-year anniversary of the loan came and went. I waited a week before calling my mother, trying to be delicate. "I was just wondering if there was any plan for paying back that money," I asked, my voice calm. The line went cold. "Good heavens," she snapped, her voice laced with ice. "After everything Mark has been through, you're going to hound him about money? He's under a lot of pressure. You need to be more patient. Patient." The word felt like a slap. The next Sunday, I went to the dealership to speak to Mark directly. I found him in his office, feet up on his polished mahogany desk. When I brought up the $50,000, he actually laughed. "Look, I appreciate the help, I really do," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "But you have to see it as an investment. You invested in the family. It's not like it was a business deal with a contract. It was your duty. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual business to attend to." He turned back to his computer, and I was left standing there, a ghost in the office my money had saved. I walked out of that dealership and didn't look back. The feeling wasn't anger, not yet. It was a profound, hollow coldness. I had been a tool, a convenience to be used and then discarded. The $50,000 wasn't the real loss. It was the realization that the love and respect I thought I could earn from my family was never on the table. It was a fantasy. Sitting in my old car, the engine rumbling beneath me like a patient friend, I finally understood. I could not appeal to their love, their honor, or their conscience, because they had none. They only understood one thing: power. The kind of power that came with money. That was the day I stopped trying to be their son and their brother, and started planning to become their banker. The final straw came a week later. I was scrolling aimlessly through my phone when a photo popped up on my feed. It was Sarah. She and Mark were standing on a white sand beach, cocktails in hand, grinning at the camera. The caption read, "A much-needed getaway to the Bahamas," celebrating a record-breaking year at Prestige Motors. Hard work really does pay off. Blessed. Hard work, my life savings, my broken dream of a home. A cold, quiet rage, unlike anything I had ever felt, settled deep in my bones. It wasn't hot or explosive, it was focused, it was fuel. I stopped going to family dinners, I stopped answering their calls, they barely seemed to notice. In their minds, I had served my purpose and had now faded back into the scenery. They didn't know that I was spending every waking hour outside of my day job building something. I was a software developer, a skill they always dismissed as playing on the computer. They never understood what I did, so they never considered it valuable. I saw a massive inefficiency in how dealerships managed their used car inventory and auction data. Mark himself had complained about it. So I started coding. Fueled by cheap coffee and the memory of their laughter, I built a platform. An analytics tool that could predict market values with stunning accuracy, helping dealerships maximize profits on every trade-in and auction purchase. For 2 years, I lived and breathed code. I poured all my pain, all my frustration, into lines of logic and data. While they were taking vacations, I was building my weapon. My software, which I named ClearShift, was a quiet success at first. I sold it to a few small, independent dealerships who saw their profits soar. Then, word of mouth did its work. A story about my platform appeared in an automotive trade journal. Suddenly, my phone didn't stop ringing. Within a year, ClearShift was being used by dealership chains across the country. I hired a small team, leased an office, and watched as the money I had lost was returned to me 100 times over. I was the founder and CEO of a rapidly growing tech company, but I didn't buy a mansion or a sports car. I kept living simply, my focus singular. I kept the old sedan. I had it professionally restored on the inside, the engine, the transmission, the electronics. But I told the mechanic to leave the exterior exactly as it was, dents, primer patch and all. It sat in the garage of my new, comfortable house like a monument to a promise I had made to myself. For 3 years, I had almost no contact with my family. Then, one day, my mother called. There was no apology in her voice, only annoyance. "We're having a big party for the 10th anniversary of Mark's dealership," she announced. "Everyone is going to be there. You need to come. It's time to let bygones be bygones." She made it sound as if our estrangement was my childish choice, a petty grudge I needed to get over. The thought of facing them all was nauseating, but then a slow smile spread across my face. It was the perfect stage. You see, my company's software gave me a unique view of the entire automotive market. I could see the financial health of nearly every dealership in the state. For the past 6 months, I had been watching Prestige Motors with great interest. The data told a story that Mark's flashy Instagram post did not. He was drowning. To keep up his image, he had taken on massive loans to stock his lot with exotic cars that weren't selling. He was over-leveraged and bleeding cash. The bank that held his debt was getting nervous. My software predicted he had less than a month until he defaulted. So when my mother called with her invitation, I knew it was time. I spent the next 2 weeks not preparing a speech, but talking to my lawyers and my bank. The day before the party, I made one final transaction. I didn't just buy a new suit, I bought all of Mark's debt. And so I drove to the party. As I pulled my old sedan into the lot filled with gleaming luxury vehicles, I felt a profound sense of calm. The moment I stepped out of the car, it began, just as I knew it would. Mark's bellowing laugh, Sarah's tittering, my parents' faces tight with shame. I let their words, their scorn, wash over me. It was just noise now. I walked past them without a word, entering the showroom where music was playing and waiters were serving champagne. I waited patiently for the main event. About 30 minutes later, Mark stepped onto a small makeshift stage, a microphone in his hand. He began a rambling, self-congratulatory speech about vision, passion, and the unrelenting hard work it took to build his empire. As he paused for applause, I made my move. I walked to the front of the room and stood at the foot of the stage. "Mark," I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the silent room. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're forgetting to thank one of your earliest and most important investors." He stared at me, his face turning from confusion to rage. "What are you doing? Get out of here. You're embarrassing yourself." I smiled a thin, cold smile. "I'm not the one who should be embarrassed," I said. I gestured to the back, where my lawyer, a stern-looking man in a tailored suit, was now standing by the entrance. "Most of you know me as Sarah's brother, but my name is the founder and CEO of ClearShift Analytics. As of 9 a.m. yesterday, my company acquired the entirety of this dealership's outstanding debt from the bank. As you've missed your last 3 payments, Mark, you're in default. This party is officially over." A gasp went through the crowd. Mark's face went completely white. That's impossible," he stammered. "This is my company." My lawyer stepped forward. "I'm afraid not," he said, his voice booming with authority. The ownership has been legally transferred. My client is the new owner. Security will now escort you and your family off the premises." My parents and Sarah looked like they had seen a ghost. Mark just stood there, sputtering, as two security guards approached the stage. I looked at him one last time. "5 years ago, you laughed at me and stole my future," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "You forced me into that piece of junk car out there, but that car became my motivation. The money you stole was the seed that grew the company that just crushed you. So thank you, Mark. Enjoy your newfound freedom. You're going to need it." I turned my back on them, walked out of the building I now owned, and got into my old car. As I started the engine, I didn't look back. I just drove toward the horizon, finally free.